Hi guys, and welcome back to the workshop. Thank you for joining me, and in today's video we'll be making a ancient Alaskan tool called an ulu. We'll be making it out of Damascus steel. We'll be doing a ladder pattern similar to my last video, but instead of the traditional ladder pattern we're going to be doing something a little different. We might even add some raindrop pattern in there. Now, what's really cool about an ulu is it's been used for over 5,000 years, and the earliest one dates back to 25,000 BC. Like I said before, it was used by the people of Alaska, and also it was used by Canadians and people of Greenland. So I think it'll be a really cool build. Again, thank you for watching. Now let's get into it. Super fun fact, this is gonna be for sale. All you have to do, go down in the description, click the link to my website. It'll take you to the product page, and you can purchase the ulu if you'd like there.
Now the starting billet will be 15 layers of alternating 15 and 20 and 1084 steel.
With the billet welded up, got some rebarb attached to it, we can go ahead and light the forge.
Now on my first heat I just do a super light pass through the press to make sure the welds are set, and then again with the second heat, same thing. Once I'm sure I have the weld set, I hop over to the drawing side of my dies and start to draw out the billet. I want to draw it out pretty intensely so I can cut it up and restack it. My goal is to get it about 12 inches so I can cut it up into 4 3-inch sections and stack those on top of each other to make 60 layers. Here you can see I'm using a swedge block to make sure I have a consistent width down the length of my billet. Now on the final pass, I have it drawn out to the thickness and length I'd like it. It's time to let that bad boy cool down nice and slow in the forge.
So with the billet cooling down in the forge, I just want to give a quick shout out to Coal Iron Works for this press. I am not sponsored by them in any way, but just want to say this is a beautiful machine, completely USA built. It is a 16-ton press on an H-frame, and I have a 5-horsepower power pack back there, and I also have a foot treadle attachment. This thing completely ran through that billet like it wasn't even there. It's so much better than that little 5-ton press I had rigged up. This thing is a huge upgrade to the shop.
Now, with all that said, it is time to get this bad boy cut up into 4 sections, and we will then clean them up on the belt grinder with a old 36 grit belt to get all that forge scale off.
So with all 4 pieces cleaned up and ground, I went ahead and stacked them. Now it is time to weld these together.
I weld all 4 corners, and it doesn't show it, but I do re-weld on 2 bars of rebarb. So again, with the first pass under the press, it's nice and gentle to ensure the forge welds stick. After they are stuck together, I can hop under the drawing out dies on my press and draw it out pretty aggressively. Again, I am going to shoot for a 12-inch billet. After it's cooled down, I'm cleaning it off with an angle grinder instead of the belt grinder. The angle grinder just does a lot better job at getting all the forge scale off of the billet. Next, I am cutting it into 3 4-inch sections. I then stack those together with 1084 in between each layer. Now it's back into the forge and onto our final round of forge welding. After doing what I can on the press, I hop over to the anvil and do a heck of a lot of hand forging. I'm upsetting the ends of the billet, so when I add that signature ulu curve, I have some material I can draw down and use for my handle connections. With it shaped, I let it cool down in the forge.
Now, with the ulu rough shaped and cleaned up, it's time to add our ladder pattern. I think I'm going to be doing a diamond pattern again, but I'm going to be making a lot thicker diamonds. They're just going to be a lot larger instead of those really tiny diamonds I did last time, and then I might even add some raindrop pattern in there, maybe in between the diamonds or wherever I see fit. So we'll go ahead and get those drawn on here and marked up, and then cut them out.
Now with the pattern cut and drilled into the blade, it's time to heat that bad boy up and get it flat. I do that by the press and through hand hammering. A lot of hand hammering. And as I will talk about here shortly, I start to get frustrated because the metal isn't moving the way I would like it to, and it's not doing exactly what I wanted it to do.
So last night came to an abrupt stop while I was forging out the ulu. I had cut my ladder pattern in, and I was flattening everything out to bring the pattern to the surface, and I was getting a little ahead of myself, a little antsy, and getting frustrated that it wasn't forming the way I wanted it to, and so I decided I needed to just stop what I was doing, because the longer I was going to be working, the more I'd get frustrated, and I'd just go down that rabbit hole. Took the time, slept on it, regrouped, and now we are back. I have a plan, and I think it's going to work out. It is pretty thin. It's thinner than I wanted it to be, but ulus are traditionally a culinary tool. They're used for skinning and like chopping up food and meat. So the thickness, I think, will be okay for a culinary tool. You know, they're supposed to be thin, so they slice and whatnot. So that's going to work out, which is great. So we can go ahead and fire up the forge and get started.
So the plan is to just really hit the horn of the anvil hard and try and get that blade rounded out and to the circumference that I would like. That was my biggest issue that I was having, is getting the radius down to the dimensions I wanted. With a profile I'm happy with, I draw on the edges of the ulu and get those cut out with the angle grinder. After that, it's time to clean up the profile and shape up the edges of the blade. Once the edges are completely shaped, I then scribe a line transferring the circumference of the edge onto the circumference where your hand will go, and hogging off all that material with a brand new 36 grit belt. After that, it's on to clean up the flats of the blade and make everything nice and symmetrical.
So now with the ulu shaped and rough ground, we're going to go ahead and hop over to the forge. It's heating up right now, and get our normalizing cycles done.
So the reason normalizing is so important is because it takes a silly goofy little blade and makes it 100% normal.
With our ulu now completely normalized and everything is normal, we can hop over to what we will be doing for a handle. Now, for the handle, I'll be making it out of a piece of leaf spring steel. As you can see here, I went ahead and got the pattern and design drawn on to the piece of steel. Now we'll hop over to the angle grinder, where we will cut it out, get it rough shaped and whatnot. Then we can move to the 72-inch belt grinder, and we will clean it up, get the profile looking how we'd like it, get it nice and clean and pristine. Then from the belt grinder, we'll hop over to the drill press, where we will drill our pinholes. Now that the handle is completely done with, it is time to hop over to the kiln, and we will get our ulu blade heat treated. So let's go over there, we'll heat it up and quench it. Alrighty, so it is now time to quench. It has had a full heat treating cycle, so we'll go ahead and take it out and into the oil. Didn't hear any cracking or popping, so that's good news. Make sure it's straight. Looks pretty good. Now, go ahead and grab a file and file test it. Oh yeah, that bad boy is hard. File skating. Beautiful.
And back into the kiln for some tempering cycles.
So the ulu, now that the ulu has completed its tempering cycles, we can go ahead, hop over to the grinder, we'll clean it up, and we'll get started on our bevels.
So starting off, I use a 120 grit belt just to clean up the sides, and then I move up to a 240 belt, getting rid of all those 120 lines just to prepare for our handle. Now I am welding on the handle. As you can see here, I have it completely clamped down to my bench just to prevent any warping or any movement during the heating process. After that, I throw on a brand new 120 grit belt just to clean up those welds and make everything look super nice. Now here I am scribing a bevel line with my calipers. On this build, I'm going to try something a lot different than I've done in the past. I'm going to be doing a convex grind. So I'm going to make my steepest grinds first with the platinum attachment, making those grinds at about a 45 and then working my way slowly towards that line. After that, I'm going to remove the platinum and use the slack belt to grind that convexity into the bevels. With the bevels rough ground, it's time to work on cleaning up the hand slot, cleaning up those welds, and just rounding everything off and making it look even and symmetrical. So with all that complete, now brings us to my favorite part of the blade making process, hand sanding. Oh boy, how I just love it. So to start off, I just take it to a 400 grit finish. I will then come back later on before I etch and take it all the way up to 800.
Alrighty, now that our ulu has been rough ground, it's time to choose a handle material. Now on my Instagram, I posted a poll that you guys could vote on, and it was between these three woods. We have ebony, walnut, and coffee. Now what was really interesting is it was a complete tie between the walnut and the coffee. So I'm going to make the executive decision, and we're going to go with coffee. I think it's a pretty interesting look. I haven't used it a whole lot. I think I've only used it on one knife, whereas walnut I've used plenty of times. So I kind of want to use the coffee and see how it turns out with the Damascus pattern.
So with our final handle material selected, I'm just tracing out the profile and shape of our handle and our palm well. After that, I'm hopping over onto the bandsaw, and it took me a little bit longer than I would have liked to realize I don't have the right blade. So I switch out that blade for a wood cutting blade, and boy oh boy does it make a difference when you have the right tool for the right job. Now just cutting that in half, getting both of the scales separated, and then cut into the palm well here and cut around the edge lines on the outside. After that, I drilled the holes, and I know you can't see it, but I do in fact drill both scales. I then hop over to the grinder and get them cleaned up and profiled according to how I would like.
So with our handle rough ground and shaped up, it is now time for our etch. We have some acetone here. We'll go ahead and clean off our ulu. Give it a nice scrub. Make sure it's nice and clean and that there's nothing left on it that could tarnish our etch. And now with all that, it is time to go into the acid. Now I had to think of an unconventional way to etch this, just because my original etch tank is just a jar, and obviously this would not fit into a jar, so I cut open a plastic bottle and I'm using the bottom, which I think will work out nicely for me. Now, we just have to wait 20 minutes, so I will see you then. Alright, it has been exactly 20 minutes, so we can go ahead and take this out of the acid. Pull that out of there. It's got a neat little pattern to it. A lot different than I was expecting. Put it in some baking soda water. And now, let that dry off a little bit. And it'll be time for coffee. Alrighty, and we are back after a nice 8-hour soak in some instant coffee. And it still amazes me now that what difference coffee can make on a Damascus pattern. It just really makes it pop. So I got the blade wrapped up in some tape, and it is now time to epoxy our handle on. So we'll go ahead and get that done.
So, fun little story. This was probably one of my least efficient epoxies that I've ever done, just because I realized I didn't make enough epoxy right about here, and it took a little bit for the epoxy to come out of the bottle. It was cold and I'm running low, so it just did not make for a super fun time, but everything ended up being a-okay and worked out in the end. So with a full 24-hour cure time, it's now time to touch up the handle, get the pins ground down, and here I'm just grinding the flats. Then it's back to hand sanding. I work my way up from 100 grit all the way up to a wet sanding 1000 grit. After that, I go ahead and throw some linseed oil and beeswax on the handle to finish it up and give it a nice coat.
With the handle sanded and finished, I went ahead and sharpened the blade. It has a beautiful mirror edge on it, and this super sweet sheath. Now, with all that being said, it takes us to the conclusion of today's video. Again, this bad boy will be for sale, so if you'd like to support the channel that way, just click the link down in my description. It'll take you to my website, and you can purchase it that way. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.